Hello, everyone. Tonight, we begin with a question about ancient silence. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to hold a message in your hands, one that no one living can read? Join us to explore this dramatic and surprising story now. The tale of the Indus Valley script is not just about lost letters, it's about vanished voices, forgotten cities, and the eerie calm of history whispering without words. It's also a little boring. Not in the nothing happens way, more like in the you might not make it through this voyage awake kind of way. Before you snuggle into your blanket, hit like on the video and comment where you're watching from and what time it is there. It's so fun to know who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You kneel beside a river that no longer flows. The mud is dry beneath your fingers, but as you lean in closer, you can imagine it wet, soft, and pliable, pressed under the palm of a person from 4,000 years ago. On that once moist slab, a pattern of symbols was carved, tiny, purposeful, silent. Your eyes follow the faint indentations, loop straight strokes, a horned animal no larger than your thumb. It doesn't look like writing in the way you're used to. There are no letters, no grammar you recognize, but something about it feels deliberate, like someone was trying to speak. Now picture this: no armies, no kings, no grand statues shouting their names, just quiet towns of red brick, carefully planned streets, and public baths so advanced they'd make your modern plumbing blush. The Indus Valley Civilization, stretching from present-day Pakistan into northwest India, wasn't flashy. It was methodical, calm, and curiously literate, in a way we still don't understand. Let's imagine you are that ancient writer. Perhaps you're seated cross-legged on a woven mat, the scent of river reeds thick in the air. You pick up a lump of soft clay. You press your seal into it, a tiny stone square carved with symbols. You lift it away. The impression is clean. You've just left your mark. But for what? For whom? Was it a trade label? A blessing? A family name? That's the thing we don't know. And because no one knows your message, may as well be a sigh in the wind. It's strange to think how many of these symbols have survived on thousands of seals, potsherds, and tablets, but how utterly mute they've become, like staring into a locked diary. Every scholar who's ever tried to crack the code has come away either frustrated or occasionally wildly overconfident. The first of these messages was found in the 1870s by a British engineer named Alexander Cunningham. While surveying railway construction near Harappa, he picked up a carved seal with a bull and strange letters above it. He didn't know it yet, but he'd stumbled upon a civilization no one remembered. A people whose cities predated Egypt's pyramids and who had developed their own possibly writing system before most of the world had even considered scratching ink onto papyrus. Imagine that for a moment. You find a small stone no bigger than a matchbox. It has a unicorn-like bull on it, always in profile, always alert. And above it, a script. 5, maybe 6 symbols. A fish, a trident, a comb. None of these are random. You feel that with every inch of your being. But here's where it gets frustrating. No one ever wrote a long passage in Indus script. No legal codes, no epic poems, no laundry lists. The average inscription is 4 or 5 symbols long, just enough to be tantalizing, not enough to build grammar from. It's like trying to understand an entire opera from 5 notes hummed under someone's breath. And then there's the fact that this language, whatever it was, died out completely. Unlike Latin or Sanskrit, there were no descendants to carry it forward. It left no spoken trail, no bilingual dictionary, no stone with the same message carved in multiple languages, like the Rosetta Stone that unlocked Egyptian hieroglyphs. Still, those marks exist. Sometimes, you wonder if the symbols even are a language. Maybe they're just symbolic, religious, decorative. That debate, language or not, is still going on. Some scholars argue that without enough variety in the inscriptions, there's no way to be sure. Others point to subtle changes in symbol placement and usage that suggest something more structured. So what does that mean for you? Here by the silent riverbank, it means you're touching a mystery no one solved. You're connected to a person who lived before the Vedas were sung, before Confucius spoke, before the Maya mapped stars. And you're both bonded and divided by a message that made it through time without its key. Imagine holding that clay tablet again. Feel the dry grit under your thumb. Close your eyes. Try to listen. What does it say? Perhaps something mundane, wheat 4 sacks. Perhaps sacred, to the river goddess with gratitude. Or maybe, just maybe, it was something playful. A joke, a name, a sigh. Historians rarely allow for jokes, but you can. One last thought before you sleep deeper. The symbols are always beautiful. Even if they mean nothing, they meant something once. That might be enough. Maybe meaning isn't always in translation. Maybe it's in the knowing that someone long ago tried to say something to someone like you. The streets are too straight to be an accident. As you rise from the riverbank and follow a trail of sun-baked stones, you step into the hush of a city built with uncanny precision. Walls rise around you, made from perfectly uniform bricks, each one molded with care and baked in kilns that have long since cooled. The air carries a trace of salt, the memory of monsoons, and maybe even the ghost of dung-fueled fires. You're walking through the ruins of a civilization that, unlike many of its contemporaries, didn't scream its existence with towering statues or royal tombs. There are no thrones here, no inscriptions praising kings, no colossal faces staring down in stone. Yet the city of Harappa and its southern twin, Mohenjo-Daro, sprawled across the Indus plains with organized grace. The roads intersect at right angles. The buildings have standardized bricks. The drainage system rivals some modern towns. It's like they built for function, not fame. And this is where things get strange. Imagine trying to rule a city, much less a network of them, without a visible hierarchy. There are no palaces, no royal burials filled with gold and bones, no massive temples rising to the skies. It's as though everyone agreed on the rules without someone shouting them. Now, that's either a sign of utopia, or more likely of a complex society that didn't feel the need to brag. Here's the funny bit. Archaeologists keep looking for the king and coming up empty. One scholar joked that the Indus people were the least egotistical civilization ever. Another suggested they may have been governed by councils or by merchant guilds, or maybe something even stranger. Perhaps the rivers governed everything. You pause at the mouth of what was once a house. Its threshold still bears the groove where thousands of feet passed over centuries. There's a well inside, not a public one, but private, right in the courtyard. You kneel and imagine the splash of cold water drawn by hand, the echo of laughter as children chase each other around the pillars. And just beside that well, a brick-lined bathroom. A real functioning bathroom with sloped floors for drainage and access to the city's underground sewer system. Yes, really. Millennia before flush toilets, these people figured out how to direct wastewater away from homes. You suddenly feel less clever about your apartment's temperamental plumbing. Now, here's the question. Who designed this? Was there a chief architect, a city planner, some ancient bureaucrat with a reed pen and a checklist? Historians still argue whether the urban planning of the Indus cities was centralized or evolved communally over time. It's part of the broader puzzle. Without decipherable texts, they have to work backwards, from bricks, from roads, from what isn't there. One thing is clear: this was a literate culture. But what did their writing do, if not glorify kings or record laws? You reach the edge of the market district, or what seems to be one. Stone weights still sit on ancient scales. Dusty platforms hint at vendor stalls, and among the debris, dozens of small seals have been found, each engraved with animals, and that mysterious script. This is where the writing turns up again and again. Short, repetitive, precise. A popular theory: these were trade markers, labels. You stamp a bag of grain or a crate of cotton with your seal, and people know it's yours. It's bureaucratic, yes, but also kind of brilliant. No big inscriptions, no drama, just a language of record-keeping and quiet efficiency. But here's the fringe bit. Some scholars think the uniformity of these cities, bricks the same size across regions, seal styles consistent over hundreds of miles, suggests a civilization run by a shared ideology rather than a ruler. Maybe even a priestly class that managed everything behind the scenes. Imagine that. Not temples to one god, but quiet beliefs woven into the way streets were laid and water was moved. Maybe the writing wasn't about conquest or sermons, but ritual schedules, sacred inventories, silent agreements. If so, the real throne may have been a ledger. Now take a moment. You're standing at a crossroads of that ancient city. Dust swirls past your ankles. Imagine you're not alone. Next to you is Lonnie, a seasoned navigator from another tale visiting far from her Pacific islands. She's traded her outrigger for curiosity. Her fingers trace the symbols on a seal. Her brows furrow. "These people," she says softly, "they didn't need to shout. They just did." You smile. Lonnie has a way of saying things that feel like truth. She slips the seal into your palm and walks on. So, back to you. How does it feel to be in a city with no statues, no obvious leaders, but thousands of homes, workshops, granaries, and public baths? A city where every brick matches a neighbor's and no one signed their name in stone. It feels intentional. That's the real mystery. Not just what the writing means, but why it's the only thing left to speak for a people so careful, so quiet, and so enduring. Maybe next time you hold something ancient, be it a coin, a pot, or a seal, you'll pause and wonder, what was the plan? Who whispered the orders? And why did they never bother to say them out loud? You step barefoot onto warm, sun-baked stone. The air is dry and still, but the heat lingers in the city's skeleton, as if the walls themselves remember the warmth of human life. You've come to a place called Mohenjo-Daro Mound of the Dead. But tonight, there are no ghosts here, only the hushed memory of water. You pad softly toward the edge of the Great Bath, a structure unlike anything else from the ancient world. It's rectangular, lined with finely fitted bricks, and surprisingly deep. You crouch beside it, dipping your hand into the dusty hollow where water once shimmered. If you listen closely, can you hear the splashing? Can you feel the echo of footsteps along the stone edges? This was no ordinary bath. It was carefully sealed with bitumen to prevent leaks. Stairs descend from either end, symmetrical, balanced, inviting. A large courtyard once surrounded it, complete with changing rooms and small chambers that may have held religious or civic functions. It's the kind of place that makes you whisper without knowing why. Now imagine you're one of the priests, or caretakers, or cleaners, or whoever ran this complex. You sweep the steps each morning. You light oil lamps at dusk. You keep the bath pristine, not for hygiene, but for ritual. Historians still debate the bath's true function. Was it ceremonial, communal, reserved for elites, or open to all? And right beside the bath in a nearby chamber, someone once pressed clay tablets with symbols. The Indus script turns up again, brief, mysterious, always whispering rather than shouting. It's like someone meant to leave a trail, but never left a map. Here's a quirky bit. Archaeologists once discovered a small figure in Mohenjo-Daro. They nicknamed the Priest King. He sits cross-legged, draped in a cloak, decorated with trefoil patterns, his eyes half-lidded in apparent calm. But he's only 6 inches tall, more trinket than tyrant. Some think he was a ruler. Others suspect he was a toy. His existence solves nothing, and yet he's in every textbook. You pass the room where he was found, imagining someone gently carving that stoic little face. Was it a likeness? A joke? A symbol? Again, the city gives you questions, never answers. Now, glance upward. The upper mound of Mohenjo-Daro rises like a weathered temple, though no one's sure what once crowned its summit. Perhaps a watchtower, perhaps a granary, perhaps nothing at all. You climb it slowly, foot by foot, your steps soft against the dry ground. The view from the top is wide, flat plains stretch endlessly under a dimming sky. You squint. Once the Indus River ran near here, pulsing with trade crops and meaning. Now, it's a ghostly shimmer on the horizon. Beside you, Tua, appears a wiry elder with a staff carved from driftwood, its top wound with seashells. His steps are slow but sure. He doesn't speak for a while. He just looks. Then quietly he says, "Sometimes silence is a language." You glance at him, unsure if he's talking about the city, or the script, or perhaps both. He smiles and taps the stone with his staff. You feel it, yes? You do. Down below, you see the straight rows of houses, the gridded streets, the drainage channels glinting with mica dust. It looks like a memory organized into brick. No palaces, no fortresses, just homes and order. You wonder how people coordinated all this without recorded commands, without legible instructions. How did they remember the plans, pass them down? Was the writing not for records, but for reminders, little nudges to keep the system moving? And then you spot it. A half-buried seal, tucked beside a broken stair. You kneel, brushing off sand. It bears a symbol you haven't seen before. 3 loops side by side, almost like ears. Beneath it, an animal, something between a boar and a deer. You hold it up to the light. The engraving is shallow but sharp. It feels like it matters. Lonnie walks over her braid, catching the breeze, her necklace of twisted cord resting lightly on her collarbone. She tilts her head and studies the seal. "It looks like it's listening," she murmurs. You grin. She's right. "Imagine if it could speak," you say. She replies, "Maybe it still does, just not in our language." That's the trick of Mohenjo-Daro. It gives you everything except the words. You see the structure, the planning, the elegance. You feel the rhythm of a society that thrived in its own way, on its own terms. But you can't crack its code. Not yet. Some researchers believe the writing system might have been limited, used only for trade or ritual or elite communication. Others insist there's a deeper logic waiting to be found. AI and statistical models have tried. Linguists have speculated. Hobbyists have offered theories ranging from the reasonable to the delightfully absurd. No, it's probably not Proto-Sanskrit for beware of crocodiles. Still, no one has cracked it, not fully. So tonight, as you sit on the roof of a forgotten bathhouse watching the sky dim to violet, you feel the weight of that silence not oppressive, but peaceful. It's as if the city isn't hiding its story. It's just waiting. Patient, like Tua, like Lonnie, like the script itself. And maybe that's enough for now. Just imagine you press your fingers to the brick. Somewhere, someone else once did the same. The seal in your hand feels smooth, worn in places from time and touch. You turn it slowly, letting the afternoon sun catch the shallow lines, the tiny loops and horns etched with care. And then you lift your gaze, because this isn't the only seal. You're standing at the threshold of a modest room, one of many in a row of workshops unearthed near the city center. Inside, the shelves have long since crumbled, but scattered across the floor are dozens of tiny treasures, steatite seals each no bigger than a coin, carved with elephants, tigers, even fantastical creatures with flared tails and trunks that coil into spirals. Above them, that familiar string of marks, the Indus script always compact, always deliberate. You crouch down and pick another up. This one shows a Zebu bull mid-step muscles poised expression unreadable. Above it, 4 symbols: a trident, a wavy line, something like a fishhook, and a final mark shaped like a ladder. What does it mean? Could it be a name, a job title, a place of origin? That's the thing, these seals are everywhere, across cities, across centuries, and yet they never explain themselves. Some scholars believe they were identification markers, ancient business cards, or product tags. Each merchant had a personal seal. You stamp a bale of cotton, a bag of grain, a bundle of lapis from far-off Badakhshan. The receiver recognizes the seal. The deal is trusted. Others think they may have been more spiritual invocations, blessings, charms. You carry a seal, not just to claim something, but to protect it. Still others suggest a social function. Perhaps these were tokens of status like guild membership badges or ceremonial licenses. Historians still debate which theory holds the most weight, and none have sealed the case. Now let's get a little weird just for a moment. One fringe idea says the animals weren't symbolic at all. They were totems, spirit companions. Maybe your seal bore a unicorn bull, not because you sold livestock, but because that's the creature who walked beside your soul. Lonnie would like that theory. She's always been fond of metaphors. You glance over your shoulder and see her sitting cross-legged in the dust, stringing together tiny beads red, carnelian, bright as blood, and dull green faience. She's focused, quiet. She doesn't speak unless it matters, but the soft jingle of her necklace cord and shell bone and stone speaks enough. She holds up a bead to the light. They polished this with sand and patience, she says. One slip and it cracks. You nod. These people made beads so small, so perfect, that even modern tools struggled to recreate them. They drilled holes barely the width of a hair. They didn't just make jewelry, they made statements in silence. And here's the wild part. Many of these beads, these seals, these carved animals, they've been found not just in the Indus Valley, but thousands of kilometers away, in Oman, in Bahrain, in Mesopotamia. Yes, Mesopotamia, the land of cuneiform and ziggurats. There, in the ruins of cities like Ur and Lagash, archaeologists found Indus seals. Foreign, mysterious, unreadable. Just like here. What does that mean? It means these people traded. Not in whispers, but across oceans. They sailed along coastlines guided by stars and monsoon winds. They carried goods, cotton, timber, gold, ivory, and ideas. Maybe even stories. And yet, wherever their script went, it remained closed. No Mesopotamian scribe ever copied it. No bilingual inscriptions ever appeared. The Indus script traveled far, but it never translated. Imagine that, leaving home, crossing the sea, bringing your voice with you, but knowing no one can read it. It's like shouting in your dreams. Tua joins you now. He leans on his staff, his breath even and slow. These marks, he murmurs, they're not words. They're weights. Memories pressed flat. That's why they don't explain. You raise an eyebrow. Weights, he smiles. To keep balance. Between people. Between past and now. You don't read them. You carry them. You don't understand fully, but somehow it makes sense. You trace one more seal. A man with horns. Or is it a mask? Beneath him, a series of vertical bars. Perhaps a calendar. Perhaps a warning. Perhaps a very, very old joke. Who's to say? Now you walk through the workshop district, kicking up fine grit. This place was alive once, echoing with chisels, laughter, bargaining. Children darting between stalls. Potters shaping vessels and spinning blur. Metal workers fanning copper flames. And everywhere seals. Tiny messages, each one locked tight, and still, they show up in nearly every major Indus city. Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro, Dhalavira, Lothal, over 4,000 samples found, not a single readable one. Which brings us to an odd irony. The Indus Valley left behind more writing samples than many early civilizations. But less understanding than almost any. It's like being given an entire book. Only every page is the title. You can hold it, you can turn it over, but you'll never quite crack it open. And yet you try. We all do. Because there's something in the curve of each symbol. Something human. You recognize the impulse. To leave a mark. To say I was here. I mattered. This seal means something, even if that something is still just beyond your reach. You hold the seal a little longer, turning it over in your palm like a stone worn smooth by years in a riverbed. But this isn't nature's doing. This is human, deliberate. The more you stare, the more the symbols seem to shift. Maybe not in shape, but in meaning. Or rather in potential meaning. Because here's the hardest truth of all. We have no Rosetta Stone. The Egyptian hieroglyphs had one, a trilingual decree, carved in basalt, found near the Nile, that let us match symbols to Greek. Boom, code cracked. But for the Indus script, nothing. No translations. No borrowed phrases. Not even a single bilingual label to say, this means goat. So you sit with it. The seal, the script, the silence. Picture this. You're a modern-day archaeologist, staring at thousands of these little inscriptions. Each one, just a handful of symbols. 4, 5, 6 at most. No long scrolls, no paragraphs, no repetitions long enough to identify verbs, nouns, or structure. It's like trying to learn a language from bumper stickers, and even those stickers don't stick in the same direction. That's not just a figure of speech. Some Indus inscriptions seem to read right to left, others maybe left to right. A few might go top to bottom. There's no agreed-upon direction, which makes reading them feel like solving a maze on a spinning plate. Scholars have tried everything: frequency analysis, symbol clustering, comparing inscriptions on objects found in similar contexts. Some patterns emerge, but they're slippery. For example, the script may use a prefix system, a root symbol followed by qualifiers, like goat plus white or fish plus trader. But with so few symbols per seal and no known sound values, it's guesswork. Now imagine trying to decipher it using computers. In the past 2 decades, machine learning has stepped in. Pattern recognition, statistical modeling. AI has tried to learn the rules of the Indus script without even knowing what it's saying. Kind of like solving a jigsaw puzzle blindfolded. One computer model suggested that the script behaves more like spoken language than random symbols. Another found that some symbol combinations follow predictable orders indicating grammar. That's exciting, but it's still just behavior, not meaning. Imagine trying to understand a conversation where you can hear rhythm and tone, but not a single word. You'd know something is being said. But what? This brings you to a quiet, sobering fact. We don't even know what language the Indus people spoke. Not one. Not even a family of languages. You lean back against a wall of dusty brick, the sunlight low and golden. It paints everything in warm stillness. The language is gone, not just untranslated, but extinct. It left no child, no cousin, no echo in modern tongues. Or if it did, we haven't traced the lineage. Some think it may have been related to Dravidian languages spoken today in southern India, like Tamil. Others argue it could be from an entirely lost linguistic family. A few even propose links to early Indo-European or Austroasiatic roots, but no one knows. Tua joins you again, settling beside you with a groan. Once I forgot the name of a fish I knew. Since childhood, he says. It tasted the same, swam the same, but the name was gone. You glance at him. What did you do? He smiles. I gave it a new name, but I always felt the old one hiding in the bones. That's what the Indus script is, a name hiding in its own bones. You reach into your satchel and pull out rubbing a thin charcoal imprint of another seal. This one has a fish symbol, or what looks like one. It shows up often in the script. Too often for coincidence. Maybe it means fish. Maybe it's a syllable. Maybe it's an entire word. One theory even suggests the Indus script uses rebus writing where a picture stands not for the thing itself, but for its sound. Like a bee plus a leaf hills belief. But if so, you'd need to know the spoken language first to get the joke, and we don't. Still, the symbols are oddly specific. One looks like a comb, one like a ladder, one like a double-looped knot, one like a crowned head. Not quite pictographs, not quite letters. Something in between. This ambiguity is what makes the Indus script one of the hardest codes in history. It's not long enough to be obviously linguistic, but not random enough to dismiss. It's like nature and culture got together and conspired to leave us with just enough to stay curious, just enough to almost understand. You feel Lonnie's presence before you hear her. She hands you a shell filled with cool water. Her brow is furrowed. These symbols, she says, they were never meant to be read like books. You raise an eyebrow. They're meant to be remembered, recalled, like songs you hum when your hands are busy. It's a beautiful idea, the kind Tua would nod at without agreeing to. And perhaps she's right. Maybe the Indus people didn't separate reading from doing. Maybe their script lived in motion in the way you tied a rope, poured a ritual libation, or placed an offering. Perhaps the symbols only made full sense when you did the thing they described. You sip the water, cool, earthy. And as the light fades around you, you try to imagine a people who wrote not to explain themselves, but to reinforce what everyone already knew, a script of shared knowledge, collective memory. You glance at your seal again, still silent, still waiting. You wake early, if you ever slept at all, cradled in the hush of a city long gone. Your blanket, a thin layer of dust, and your pillow, the curve of a stone step. As the sky softens to dawn, a quiet realization sets in. You've been surrounded by symbols for days, yet not a single one has spoken to you directly. You stretch your arms, feeling the stiffness of stone beneath your back, and stare at a broken tablet near your feet. The inscription is faint, but you notice something odd. The symbols curve slightly to the left, unlike the others you saw yesterday that curved right. Direction. It sounds like such a basic thing. Surely a script has a default reading direction, left to right or right to left. Most do. But the Indus script, it's still playing games. Some inscriptions clearly read right to left. Others seem to go left to right. A few might even go Buster Feeden, snaking back and forth like an ox plowing a field. But with so few characters per inscription and so little context, it's hard to be sure. Historians still argue whether there even was a standardized direction. Now imagine trying to solve a crossword puzzle when you don't know if the clues are horizontal, vertical, or diagonal. Welcome to the world of Indus epigraphy. Tua joins you as you wander back into the workshop lanes. He squints at a stone tablet in the morning light. You know, he says, some believe these people wrote in more than one way, depending on the day, or the ritual, or the object. You raise an eyebrow. Isn't that confusing? He chuckles. Not if everyone already knows the story. There's something oddly comforting about that. Perhaps the Indus script didn't need uniformity because the people using it shared a cultural rhythm so deep they could improvise without losing the beat. You kneel next to a small, child-sized figure carved in terracotta. A woman, maybe. She holds a bowl. Her head is cocked, slightly, eyes lifted in thought. On the base is an inscription, 5 signs. One is the fish again. One looks like a leaf. The other's mystery. Lonnie stands nearby, holding a clay seal to the light. Every time we think we figured it out, she murmurs, we find something that flips it upside down. She's right. Some inscriptions are mirror images of others. Some symbols swap places. The same set of characters appears in multiple orders with different animal icons. It's almost like jazz familiar motifs shuffled and reassembled improvisation baked into the grammar. One controversial theory says the directionality of the Indus script wasn't fixed because it wasn't meant to be read linearly. That's right. Some scholars propose the symbols were meant to be viewed holistically, more like emblems or mandalas than sentences. You don't read them left to right. You interpret them all at once, like a story made of symbols rather than syntax. Imagine that. Language not as a thread, but as a burst of meaning. It fits oddly well with how the civilization lived. No central authority, yet unified planning. No royal inscriptions, yet cities that flowed like music. Maybe their script mirrored that same logic order without rigidity, communication, without conformity. You reach into your bag and pull out a slate. You've been working on a personal experiment. On it, you've copied a dozen inscriptions by hand. The symbols are strange, but familiar now. You've grouped them by shape, by frequency, by animal pairings. Patterns emerge, then vanish, like trying to hold smoke. Still, you feel something shift in you. Not understanding, but recognition. Like hearing a melody you can't name, yet knowing you've danced to it before. Let's make it tactile. Close your eyes for a second. Imagine you're holding a carved seal. Feel the grooves beneath your fingers. How much pressure did the artist use? Was the stone hot from the sun when they carved it, or cool in the shade of a river market? Now imagine pressing it into clay. The satisfying squish, the subtle crackle as it lifts. A symbol made and remade 1,000 times by different hands, and yet still unbroken. Tua touches your shoulder. Direction matters, he says, but only when you're lost. These people knew where they stood. You nod slowly. Maybe the script didn't have to move in one direction, because life didn't. It wound through rituals and seasons, births and droughts, trade winds and monsoons. Writing wasn't a straight road, it was a river. Lonnie unrolls a fiber mat beside you and sits brushing dust from her legs. The fish symbol, she says suddenly, maybe it didn't mean fish. Maybe it meant river, or offering, or harvest moon. You smile. Maybe it meant yes. Maybe it meant listen, she replies. You all sit quietly after that. A warm breeze rises, carrying the scent of dry grass and distant water buffalo. The silence feels full, not empty, not frustrating, full of something on the verge of meaning. One more thought before you drift. If you were one of them, an Indus trader, a bead maker, a priest with clay-stained hands, how would you write? What would your seal look like? What animal would walk beside your name? And would your message be meant to be read or simply remembered? The air has warmed by the time you rise again, brushing bits of straw and dust from your tunic. The seal you held earlier still presses against your palm with ghostly weight, its edges sharp, but its meaning still fogged in silence. Today, your mind turns to a different question. What were these people trying to say with their writing? You sit by a broken platform in what archaeologists call a granary, though no one's quite sure if it really was. The building's wide and low, its floor slotted with narrow brick channels. Maybe grain passed through here, maybe something else. No writing explains it, just the usual signs, just the script waiting. You lay a few tablets out in a line. Each bears a short inscription, 4 to 6 symbols, no more. You trace them one by one. Some are familiar: the fish, the comb, the bow-shaped symbol with twin dots. Others are rare, appearing only once or twice in all recorded finds. What are they saying? Here's the scholarly guesswork. Some inscriptions are thought to be economic. Tallies, trade notations. So many sacks of grain. 10 copper ingots. 1 ox marked. That would make sense. Many seals are found near trade centers and storerooms. It's easy to imagine merchants marking inventory or confirming exchanges. But here's where things get delightfully confusing. Other inscriptions are found near wells, ritual spaces, or on small statues and figurines. These might be religious, offerings, blessings, names of gods or spirits. A seal pressed onto a pot before it was lowered into a sacred pool. A clay stamp tucked into a wall for protection. The same symbols appear in both contexts. The line between trade and temple blurs. You pick up one particular seal with a horned man seated cross-legged, surrounded by animals. An iconic image known to many as the proto-Shiva figure. He's flanked by tigers, elephants, rhinos. Above him, the same curling script. Is this a god, a shaman, a powerful ancestor? Historians still argue whether the Indus people even had gods as we understand them. There are no towering statues, no temples in the Egyptian sense. But there are symbols. So many symbols. You glance over at Tua, who's drawing circles in the dust with the tip of his staff. He looks up and catches your eye. Not everything written is meant to be read, he says. Some things are meant to be felt. Lonnie sits on a fallen lintel nearby, plaiting a strand of grass into a makeshift bracelet. We always assume writing is about speaking, she says. But maybe these signs were for remembering, for holding something still. You look again at your tablets. Could it be that the script was mnemonic, a tool for memory, instead of spelling out stories or speeches? Perhaps each symbol called forth an entire ritual, a shared understanding. You didn't need to read Harvest Moon Festival. You just needed to see the horned crescent and know what song to sing, what food to bring, what prayers to whisper over ripened barley. Now, here's a quirky twist. Some researchers propose that Indus signs were meant to be performed, not read. You carried a seal, not as a document, but as a cue. When shown to the right person, it unlocked action. A trade, a chant, a rite of passage. The writing wasn't passive, it was alive. Imagine that language as trigger. You step into the remains of what was once a home. The floor is smooth packed earth. A fire pit rests near the center, ringed by polished stones. Someone lived here, ate here, laughed here, maybe argued. You spot a shard of pottery near the hearth, etched with a single sign. A swirl like a hurricane caught mid-turn. What did it mean? Was it a family symbol? A maker's mark? A personal talisman? There's no glossary, no teacher to say for sure. Still, you can feel it. These people wrote because it mattered. They carried their script like a thread through life across trade, worship, family, death. You reach into your pouch and draw out a handful of small objects, seal rubbings, clay shards, tiny beads. You arrange them in a circle. They don't form a sentence, but they do form a story of trade across seas, of cities without kings, of water brought by stone channels and fire lit each dusk with kindling and song, of fish symbols carved by hand pressed into clay and forgotten until now. Tua stands and walks over. He looks at your circle of relics and nods. Not one of these speaks, he says, but all of them remember. You sit back, feeling the gravity of that sentence, because maybe that's what the Indus script truly is, a system not of words, but of remembrance. A quiet chorus of memory. A code meant to be held, not broken. So what were they saying? They were saying we are here. We trade, we build, we believe, we carve, we seal, we remember. And now, so do you. The day passes slowly, with the sun casting long shadows across the empty courtyards of a city that still refuses to explain itself. You find yourself moving between silence and thought, picking up fragments of symbols from the earth like breadcrumbs, hoping they'll eventually lead somewhere. You're seated now beside a low stone wall that once lined a shop, or perhaps a stall where merchants exchanged goods and greetings. In your lap is a woven pouch filled with seal impressions and tablets, dozens of them, none longer than a thumb. You lay them out one by one. They whisper to you, not in words, but in echoes. Some symbols appear over and over: the fish, the jar, the three-leaf shape. Others, rarer, seem to flare into view once and never return. A careful mind would think this is random, but not you. You sense a pattern beneath the surface, like wind shaping sand into meaning that vanishes when you blink. You sigh. There must be a key, you murmur aloud, and in that moment, Tua answers, without turning his head. Not every door has one. You glance up. He's perched on a ledge nearby, shell staff across his knees, watching the rooftops like they might suddenly speak. Lonnie joins you, lowering herself onto the ground with her usual quiet grace. She's holding something wrapped in cloth. You watch her unwrap it, a seal. Yes, but unlike the others. This one is cylindrical, meant to be rolled across clay, like a miniature printing press. The motif is intricate rows of animals, stylized trees, and a series of signs forming a looping band around the seal. Look at this, she says, her voice hushed with awe. It's not just writing, it's movement. She demonstrates, rolling it gently over a patch of soft dirt. The impression it leaves stretches like a scene from a forgotten play, full of motion, of purpose. And symbols. Always symbols. This is where the theory of structure comes in. Many scholars believe the Indus script was not pictographic like early Chinese characters or Egyptian hieroglyphs, but logosyllabic, each symbol representing a whole word or a syllable. If that's true, the possibilities multiply. That little fish might stand for Ma, the sound of water in an ancient tongue. That wavy line could mean flow, river, or even time. Some linguists argue that the symbol combinations follow syntactic rules. For example, a particular sign often appears at the end of inscriptions, suggesting it acts like punctuation, or perhaps as a grammatical particle. Others note that certain symbols only appear in particular contexts near images of animals on pottery, on tools indicating that the signs weren't universal, but domain-specific, like a toolbox of meanings deployed differently for trade ritual or domestic life. Still, the data set is tiny. No long texts, no archives, just short, haunting blurts of meaning. One fringe theory suggests these symbols weren't writing in the conventional sense at all, but something more like heraldry, clan markers, emblems of affiliation. If true, then every seal is less a sentence and more a signature. Not a message to read, but an identity to recognize. You glance around the marketplace ruins and imagine them alive again. Traders unroll their goods. Beads glint in the sun. Smells of spiced grain and heated copper fill the air. And each seal, pressed into soft clay, says, "Not this is mine, but this is me." How human is that? To want to leave a mark. To want to be known even by strangers. Lonnie lifts her eyes to yours. "Maybe we'll never know exactly what they meant," she says, "but we know they meant something." You nod, heart quietly aching, and that they wanted it to last. Now consider this. If the Indus script really was phonetic, even partly, then it might be the earliest known writing system of South Asia. It would predate Brahmi, which eventually gave rise to scripts like Devanagari Tamil and Sinhala. That's no small thing. It means the Indus Valley might have spoken to the future, but the bridge collapsed. It also means they might have whispered their own names, their trades, their gods into the soft belly of clay and watched time erase them anyway. You rise and walk to the edge of a well. It's dry now, a circle of ancient stone staring up at the sky. You drop a pebble. No splash, just silence. What would you write if you knew no one could read it? What seal would you leave if it were the last message anyone might find? Lonnie's seal roll glints in the sun. Tua taps the stone beside him. And somewhere from deep in the earth, a breeze stirs carrying dust and memory, and a language that once tied people together with nothing more than carved loops and graceful lines. It's not gone. It's just waiting. You trace your fingers along the rim of the dried well, the stone warm beneath your touch. The sun is high now, and the silence has grown louder. So many ruins, so much writing, and still the feeling that you're only brushing the edge of something deeper. Today, your path leads away from the city and into the broader landscape where other voices, older still, once spoke. You cross a flat plain littered with salt bush and thorn. The land is cracked like dry skin, and yet it pulses with a hidden memory. You are following trade winds now, not the kind that shift clouds, but the invisible ones of ancient commerce. Because here's something remarkable. The Indus script didn't stay put. It traveled far beyond the valley where it was born. You kneel in a different kind of dust now Mesopotamian, in the ruins of cities like and Lagash. Over 2,000 kilometers from Mohenjo-Daro, archaeologists found strange seals. Not cuneiform, not Sumerian, something else. Indus, you stare at the impression of one such seal. A unicorn bull, proud and curving above a short string of Indus signs. It was found near a warehouse. Was it dropped by a trader? Was it part of a deal? Was it carried as a charm? Historians still debate whether these were actual trade tokens or just cultural curiosities exchanged between distant merchants. But what's undeniable is that they were there. This means the Indus Valley was no isolated cradle. It was a node in a vast pulsing network of maritime trade stretching from the Arabian Peninsula to the Persian Gulf. Ships hugged coastlines, guided by stars and monsoon winds, loaded with cotton ivory copper beads and yes seals. And here's where it gets strange. No Mesopotamian ever copied or translated the Indus script. Not even once. There are no bilingual seals. No tablets pairing Indus and Sumerian words. Nothing. It's like the writing arrived as a guest was greeted and then politely ignored. Why? Lonnie walks beside you. Now her steps light on the broken path. Maybe they didn't need translation, she says. Maybe the message wasn't the script. Maybe it was the seal itself, a mark of trust. A handshaken stone. You sit near a cluster of large amphorae, long emptied of oil or grain. The scent of ancient resin still clings faintly. You imagine traders, brown-skinned, dust-covered, laughing, bartering, unrolling goods, and nodding solemnly as deals are struck. One offers a seal. The other accepts it, not because he can read it, but because he recognizes its shape, its feel, its reputation. That's the thing. Sometimes the symbol isn't the meaning. It's the memory of meaning. You look down again at the seal impression. The symbols are sharp, elegant, but they remain silent. Always silent. Tua arrives with a small pouch. He empties it gently before you. Inside beads. Not just any beads, but unmistakably Indus. Red carnelian etched with white lines. Lapis lazuli from Afghanistan. Tiny faience discs dyed with copper salts. These too, he says. They crossed oceans. You pick up one, a single carnelian bead, cool and smooth. You hold it to the light. Within it, the ghost of a hand. Someone made this, polished it, etched it with a tool no thicker than a thorn, and sent it away across salt water, trusting it to speak on their behalf. Imagine that confidence. That invisible thread between distant ports. It makes you wonder, did the Indus traders know their writing wasn't being read? Did they care? Maybe not. Maybe they understood that the existence of a mark was enough. That to stamp a seal was to declare, I have passed here. I have touched this trade. I have shaped this exchange. It's the same urge that built pyramids, painted caves, and scratched initials into desk corners. We want to be felt, even if not fully known. And then there's some seals found in Mesopotamia show signs of recarving, as if their new owners wanted to adapt or erase parts of the original script. You can't help but smile. Even in ancient times, people were rebranding. Lonnie smirks when you tell her that. So the first cross-cultural edits, she says. Classic. You both laugh softly, the kind of laugh that trails into silence and respect. Because, despite all this movement, the Indus script stayed its own thing. Never absorbed, never adapted. It kept its grammar, its rhythm, its secrets. That's a rare kind of resilience. Tua crouches down beside a half-buried shard. He blows dust from it, revealing another familiar sign. The fish again. That ever-present fish. He glances at you. Do you think they knew this would last? You think for a long moment. Maybe they didn't. Or maybe they did. Maybe they knew symbols endure even when sense fades. That a loop carved in stone outlives a breath. That a seal pressed into clay echoes longer than a spoken word. You place the fish shard beside the amphora. Not as an answer, but as a note in a chord played millennia ago. The song goes on, even if no one knows the lyrics. Evening settles again, and the desert breeze grows cooler, slipping like silk through the narrow alleys of the half-buried port at Lothal. You're no longer standing on just dry earth, you're standing on what may have been one of the oldest dockyards in the world. The Indus people didn't just farm and trade, they engineered the sea. Before you, stone walls still squared. Outline, a massive tidal basin. It once held water, real navigable water. A channel ran from here to the Sabarmati River and from there to the sea. You step to the edge and imagine the boats moored here rocking gently, ropes creaking, sails drying under the salty sun. This was no backwater village. Lothal was a maritime hub, an anchor in a chain of trade stretching to Mesopotamia and Oman. And like all the other cities, its people wrote, but only in those maddening brief bursts. Seals, tiny tablets, no long records, no manifest scrolls. You crouch and run your hand across the dock's edge, fingernails catching in brick grooves. These were worn down by centuries of loading, unloading, bargaining, calling out across waves. Somewhere in this very port, a merchant once handed over a clay impression bearing 4 looping signs and a horned goat. The other party nodded. Deal accepted. But what did it say? Still no clue. Still just symbols. Still sealed. Lonnie walks past with a basket of pebbles and rusted trinkets, pausing to show you one. A terracotta figurine of a woman, wide-hipped and curiously detailed with an elaborate headdress. She's holding something to her chest. It might be grain, or a child, or a flower. Beneath her, once again, is that unreadable script. You've begun to recognize the cadence now. There's rhythm. There's repetition. Certain signs always come first. Others always last. It's almost musical. Like a verse you don't know the meaning of, but still hum anyway. Lonnie tilts her head. The more I see, the more I think we're not supposed to read it in the way we think. How do you mean? She picks up another seal. Maybe it's like a pattern, a textile. You don't read fabric. You wear it. You pass it down. It's a beautiful thought. The script not as code, but culture. Something lived. Something inherited. And that brings us to a haunting possibility. What if the reason we can't read the Indus script isn't because we're missing the key, but because the language itself is gone? You sit with that, not just untranslated, not just undeciphered, gone. No descendants, no distant cousins, just silence. Some experts have tried to match the script structure to the Dravidian language family. There are plausible overlaps in word order and sound groupings, especially with Tamil. But there's no definitive link. Others suggest Munda languages or even lost linguistic isolates with no modern relatives. Nothing has stuck. Tua appears beside you, carrying a leather pouch. He empties it. Inside are flattened pieces of copper, etched with strange shapes, perhaps script, perhaps decoration. Some languages die without a sound, he says. No farewell, no last song. You glance at him, and others, he looks toward the sea. They echo in what we build, in how we trade, in the way we bless our food. You think back to the drains of Mohenjo-Daro, the shell bangles of Harappa, the dock at Lothal. They don't speak in words, but they do speak. Through infrastructure, through continuity, through repetition. Lonnie kneels beside a rectangular brick. Even their bricks, she whispers, follow a ratio 4:1, over and over, standardized, uniform, passed down, not by scribes, but by habit. And that's the thing, the Indus Valley might be the only ancient civilization with a script that never evolved. Egyptian hieroglyphs changed. Cuneiform morphed. Chinese grew into layers of characters and radicals. But the Indus script? It appeared fully formed. It stayed stable for centuries, and then it vanished. Poof. No simpler protoforms, no experimental versions, no drift. Like it was created perfect and then sealed away. This leads some researchers to wonder if it wasn't a true writing system at all. Perhaps it was a set of visual identifiers, a code understood through culture, not syntax. Or a system for things we no longer track, like rites, initiations, celestial movements. The theory of celestial alignment is a quirky one, but compelling. Some believe certain symbols mimic astronomical patterns: moons, constellations, eclipses. The Indus people watch the stars after all. Their buildings aligned with cardinal directions. Their calendar may have been lunar. What if some inscriptions marked ritual time, like the seal you hold now, 3 crescents, a horned bull, and a plant sprouting skyward? Could that mean the festival of the growing moon? You don't know, but your heart stirs at the thought. What if we've been looking for grammar when we should have been looking for cosmos? You look out over the dried dock where water once kissed the bricks. You imagine a priestess in dyed robes raising a clay tablet to the horizon and whispering to the stars, saying something no longer heard. Lonnie brushes your shoulder. Even if we never read a single word, she says we can still learn how they lived. And maybe that's enough. Maybe we don't need every seal to translate into a sentence. Maybe the people of the Indus Valley already spoke to us in how they aligned their cities, how they organized their homes, how they stamped their identity into clay, not to be read, but remembered. Not all language is sound. Some is stone, and some is sea. Night falls gently over the empty port. The stars emerge one by one, hesitant at first, then confident. You lie on your back atop a flat roof in Lothal, staring upward. No torches burn, no voices rise. Only the chorus of crickets and the occasional flap of a bird unsettled in the dark. Above you, the sky mirrors the past silent, beautiful cryptic. You wonder if the people of the Indus Valley looked up at the same constellations and thought of them the way you do now, as messengers that say much but explain little. That's where your thoughts drift tonight, to what we'll never hear. Imagine a song. You don't know the words. You don't know the melody. You only know someone once sang it long and often, and it mattered. That's the Indus script. Because even if we one day decipher the signs assigned sounds, build vocabulary, guess at grammar, we'll never truly hear the voice behind it. No recordings, no oral tradition, no descendants whispering echoes of the old tongue. It's a language sealed in amber, perfect and unreachable. And here's the curious part. While many writing systems left behind monumental inscriptions, long texts chiseled into stone or painted in vibrant colors, the Indus script stayed small, always just a handful of signs. Like it never needed to say more. You turn over in the dark, facing the edge of the roof. In your pocket is a palm-sized seal. Fish, circle, comb. One curl, like a sleeping snake. You whisper it softly. Fish, circle, comb, snake. It doesn't mean anything. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But in speaking it aloud, you feel something. Like you've briefly lent breath to something that's waited too long in silence. Tua joins you, his silhouette a soft mass of shadows and cloth. He sits cross-legged and looks skyward. You know, he says, we always think of writing as sound, voice. But maybe this script wasn't meant to be read aloud. You listen. Maybe it was meant to be seen in stillness, he continues. Felt, like standing in front of a mountain, or watching fire dance on water. You think of how many inscriptions were found on amulets, seals, figurines. None of them read like scrolls. All of them seem personal, private, closer to symbols of belonging than tools of storytelling. Lonnie arrives with a small lamp, her face glowing in amber flickers. They wrote with purpose, she says. They weren't scribbling. Every mark was chosen. But not to tell you something, to mark their moment. You nod. Yes, you see that now. And so, you begin to wonder about the sounds we've lost. The actual phonetics. What did the Indus language sound like? Was it soft or clipped? Musical or measured? Did it rely on tone like Mandarin or on root words like Sanskrit? Historians have tried to reverse engineer this. One theory links the script to the Dravidian language family. In that hypothesis, words in ancient Tamil, still spoken today, might carry whispers of the Indus Valley's voice. Some believe the word for fish in Tamil might correspond to the fish symbol so common in Indus inscriptions. It's poetic, but it's also guesswork. Others suggest the Indus language was an isolate, a language like Basque or Ainu, unrelated to any living tongue. If true, then we're chasing shadows with no reflection. A voice that spoke and died alone, but even isolates leave impressions. Loan words, rhythms, names passed down in ways we don't understand. And here's the scholarly heartache. We can't even confirm the script was phonetic. It might not represent sounds at all. No vowels, no consonants, just meanings expressed directly, like Chinese logograms or traffic signs. A kind of semantic shorthand for rituals, professions, relationships. In that view, the fish might not be mean. It might be water, or prosperity, or north. It might mean all of them depending on context. Lonnie leans her head against a carved beam. The more I learn, the more I think we aren't supposed to solve this. You frown. Why not? She smiles. Because it's not a riddle. It's a mirror. That stops you. She continues. Every scholar who studies it sees something different. Traders see commerce. Linguists see syntax. Priests see ritual. It's not a puzzle. It's a reflection. You sit with that. The Indus script might not be asking to be solved. It might just be asking to be witnessed. So you close your eyes. You hold the seal to your chest. And for a moment in the silence, you imagine what their words might have sounded like. Not the phonemes, but the rhythm, the rise and fall, the breath behind the clay. Maybe the fish wasn't just a fish. Maybe it was a way of saying, we trust the waters. Maybe the circle wasn't just a loop. Maybe it meant we return to where we began. Maybe they never needed anyone to read it. Maybe it was always enough to know we were here. You stir from half-sleep, the kind where dreams and memory blend like river and silt. The stars are thinning, now the eastern horizon just starting to blush with the promise of dawn. You sit up, your body aching in places you didn't know could ache. But your hands, they move automatically, fingers wrapping around the smooth seal that's never left your pocket. It's time to leave the cities behind. Lothal, Mohenjo-Daro, Harappa. These were centers of life, yes, but the script was everywhere, not just in the heart of trade. It wandered too. You follow the course of the dried Ghaggar-Hakra River, now once wide and roaring, now a long scar of dust. Some believe this was the Saraswati River of ancient Indian texts, a sacred artery of civilization. Along its banks lie forgotten settlements too numerous to name each one a small heartbeat in a vanished rhythm. And still, you find the script on potsherds, on doorposts, on the base of a terracotta bull, on fragments of bangles. Always brief, always deliberate. This wide spread suggests something crucial. The writing wasn't limited to elites or a priestly caste. It was shared. It was known. It belonged to the people. Tua walks beside you, now slower than usual, leaning more heavily on his carved staff. It's like pollen, he murmurs, scattered by hands, carried by breath. You step carefully around a collapsed kiln. The smell of baked clay still clings as if the earth itself remembers. Lonnie is already kneeling beside a half-buried tablet, brushing it clean with the corner of her robe. This one, she says, has 2 vertical signs, almost like tally marks. You look closer. Yes, it's different. Cruder maybe, or just more urgent. Some researchers believe these variations in style and carving technique point to wider literacy than previously imagined, that the Indus script wasn't the guarded tool of scribes, but a public technology used by merchants, potters, farmers, maybe even children. Imagine that. A mother teaching her daughter to press her name into clay. A trader carving his house symbol into a crate before it sails upriver. A boy scratching his favorite animal into a wall, not because it's sacred, but because he loves it. Suddenly, the silence doesn't feel so distant. It feels personal. You pass a ruined house, its walls still thigh-high. The remains of a fire pit sit in one corner. A single tablet lies half-buried in ash. You pull it free. The surface is scorched, but the mark remains a curl, slash, a crescent. You rub your thumb over the crescent. It's shallow worn. Someone marked this, Lonnie whispers, and thought it would last forever. And for a while it did. But then one by one, the fires went out. The cities emptied. The riverbeds dried. Trade collapsed. And the language, the script, slipped into sleep. So how did it end? Historians still argue about the fall of the Indus Valley. Climate change. Shifting rivers. Earthquakes. Declining trade routes. Invasion. Or a slow collective migration to greener lands. Maybe it wasn't a fall at all. Maybe it was a drift of people choosing to adapt rather than perish. Whatever the reason, the script went with them, at least for a while. You stop at a site called Alamgirpur, far to the east, far from the urban core. Here, in the debris of a pottery mound, archaeologists found something strange, a seal fragment worn and thin, with a symbol unmistakably Indus. It's one of the last known appearances of the script. After this silence, no more seals, no more signs. The line ends. Tua crouches near a rock ledge, drawing loops in the dirt with his fingertip. You know, he says, I used to think all language was a bridge. From one person to another. From then to now. You glance at him. And now, he smiles gently. Now, I think it's a boat. A boat. A small one. You set it on the water knowing it might never reach the other side. But still, you send it. You watch the wind scatter dust into the riverbed. No boats float here now, only bones of stone. But the idea lingers. The Indus script, whatever it was, wasn't a failure. It carried meaning for as long as it needed to. It stitched people together. It marked lives. It guided trade. It anchored rituals. And then it was folded away, like a boat docked for good. Lonnie taps her finger against her necklace. The shell beads rattle softly. I think that's what we've been doing, she says. Not trying to unlock it, just keeping it afloat. You smile. Yes, because maybe the point isn't to solve it. Maybe it's to remember that someone once spoke in marks. Someone once believed that loops and curves could carry their voice past death. You press your seal into a patch of soft river silt. A fish, a crescent, a star, just because. Just to say I see you. And maybe, just maybe, they see you too. You stay by the riverbed long after the others begin to move on. Something about this patch of earth refuses to let you go. It's not the cracked mud or the remnants of kilns. It's the quiet gravity of the marks pressed into clay thousands of years ago. The Indus script doesn't scream. It waits, patient, worn, untranslated, but not forgotten. Eventually, you rise, brushing the silt from your hands. The wind is stronger now, carrying the scent of dust and far-off water. You begin walking east toward the last known settlements where the script still flickered before vanishing completely. In these peripheral places, the symbols grow rarer, cruder even. Perhaps the knowledge of carving them was fading. Or perhaps the people who held them were moving on, changing faiths, languages, habits. You feel like you're walking behind someone who left a trail, and then one day stopped looking back. You enter a village site, barely taller than your knees, just foundations now, a few scattered bricks. There's a broken vessel here, a cracked spindle whorl there, and on one stone shard, so faint it's nearly a suggestion, are 3 marks. One is that same fish. One is a trident. The last looks like a tree. You pause, not because you understand it, but because it feels final. You gently wrap the shard and tuck it into your satchel, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that this too was a language, that even a language without sound can leave a voice-shaped absence. Tua catches up his steps slower, now his breathing deeper. He doesn't speak, but he doesn't have to. The silence says enough. Lonnie joins you with a small bowl of soaked lentils boiled over a low fire she built beside a heap of stone. You eat slowly, watching the sunset burn gold across the fields where barley once grew. And then she speaks. You ever notice how none of their writing is angry? You blink. She shrugs. No curses, no threats, no battles carved in stone. Just names, symbols, peace. She's right. There are no war stories here. No conquerors etched into mountain faces. No boasts of divine right or bloody conquest. The Indus script, if it held emotion at all, held it softly. Maybe that's why it feels so alien. Or maybe that's why it feels so familiar. You lean back and gaze up at the sky. Stars wink into place above you, as if summoned by thought alone. Lonnie's words echo in the quiet no anger. You think of all the other ancient texts you've studied. The wrath of kings, the punishment of enemies, the pride of empires. And then you think of the Indus script again. Gentle, repetitive, measured. There's something deeply human in the desire to leave a record, but there's something uniquely humble in the way the Indus people did it. They didn't build colossal ziggurats or pyramids. They built efficient homes, clever drains, and reliable streets. They didn't inscribe sagas of war. They stamped fish bowls and crescents into clay. Tua taps the ground with his staff. They didn't need to be remembered as heroes, he says, just as people. You nod. That might be the secret. Maybe they didn't want to dominate the future. They just wanted to belong to it, quietly. The fire dims. The wind shifts. The night stretches long, and as you sit there, beneath a sky older than any seal, you start to feel the pull of something deeper than understanding. You don't need to read the script. You need to listen to what it doesn't say. It doesn't threaten. It doesn't exalt. It doesn't command. It simply is a reflection of a civilization that lived with balance, that didn't need to shout because it knew how to whisper, that didn't carve laws in stone because it trusted in shared memory, that didn't mourn its silence because it lived so fully in the present. Lonnie lies back in the grass beside you. What if the message was never the symbols she says? What if it was the fact that they kept writing? You look at her, startled by the simplicity of that, because she's right. Maybe the Indus people weren't trying to explain themselves to us. Maybe they were just marking time, marking moments, marking the fact that they were alive. You press your palm into the dirt. And think so am I. The fire has long gone out, but the warmth clings to your clothes, to your bones. You stir awake with the feeling that something important is close. Not a revelation, perhaps, but a kind of acceptance. This part of the journey isn't about finding answers anymore. It's about letting the questions sit beside you. You travel south now, tracing the last murmurs of the Indus script through coastal sites like Dholavira and Daimabad. Here the stones speak softer. The seals are fewer. The lines between memory and myth blur. Dholavira is a marvel, a city of water tanks and terraces. its reservoirs still catching rain after thousands of years. You walk past tiered steps, descending into what was once a ceremonial reservoir, and imagine processions of people in white robes carrying offerings singing to water. On the far end, you see a black stone slab. You hurry to it, not because it's grand, but because it holds something unique, the largest inscription ever found from the Indus civilization. 10 symbols, just 10, carved into gypsum, placed high on a platform, possibly visible from a distance. And yet, we still don't know what it says. Some think it was the name of the city. Others, a phrase of welcome, a command, a sacred motto, or maybe just the name of a god. But there it is, defiant in its stillness. The longest message we'll never read. You kneel beneath it, neck craning, and for a moment you feel the voice behind it. Not its sound, but its intention. A message meant to be seen, felt, believed. Lonnie joins you, her shadow long in the rising sun. She touches the edge of the slab. They knew no one would read it one day, she says. You glance at her. That's not the point, she continues. The point was to speak, even if no one ever answered. You sit with that for a while. It reminds you of stone cairns left on mountaintops, of names carved into cave walls, of songs sung alone at sea. You keep moving. At Damabad, far to the southeast, a bronze chariot was found. Ornate, small, pulled by oxen. Some say it's ritual. Some say it's a toy. But scratched faintly on its base are a few familiar symbols. Still Indus, still unreadable, still alive. You imagine a child playing with it, spinning the wheels, guiding it through imaginary streets. The writing was there, not for instruction, but for presence. It wasn't about controlling knowledge. It was about sharing space with it. That might be the most radical thing the Indus people left behind. Not a monument to greatness, but a network of moments. Tiny inscriptions scattered through daily life like breadcrumbs for the soul. Tua, ever steady, walks with you along a narrow ridge that once overlooked fields of millet. He doesn't say much today, but he hums a slow, rhythmic hum as though the tune were borrowed from an ancient lullaby. It doesn't belong to any language, and yet it means something. When he stops, he tells you, "This is the sound my grandmother made when she didn't have words." You smile. That too is a kind of writing. You stop at a fire pit ringed by stones. Someone once cooked here. Someone once laughed, wept, whispered to a loved one under stars. You pick up a shard of pottery, its rim still smooth from use. On it, scratched lightly, are two symbols. One like a river bend, one like a rising sun. Are they names? Directions? Nothing. You don't know, but your fingers recognize them now. They're familiar, like footsteps in a well-worn path. That's the thing about the Indus script. It's not just a puzzle, it's a ritual. Every time you look at it, trace it, imagine it, you participate in the act of remembering, even if no one can read it, even if no one ever will. Lonnie sets down her satchel and draws something in the dirt with her finger, a fish, a loop, a crescent. Then she smooths it away again, not to forget, but because she knows she can draw it again. You sit together on the edge of the fields where once grew barley, and now only wind stirs. And for the first time, you don't ache to solve it. You're content just to be near it. The writing is quiet, but it's enough. The journey winds to its final bend, not with fanfare, but with the hush that comes just before dawn. You stand at the edge of a shallow rise, overlooking a stretch of land so still, so quiet, it feels as though the whole earth is holding its breath. And in your hand, once again, is the seal. You've carried it across rivers, plains, ruined cities, and fields where no footprints remain. You've turned it over 100 times, hoping it might speak. It hasn't. And now you understand it didn't need to. You close your fingers around it. It's time to leave something behind. You kneel and press it into the earth. Not hard, just enough to leave the faintest impression in the dust. Then you lift it. The clay crumbles gently, but for a moment the mark remains. A fish, a crescent, a line, a story, a signature, a goodbye. All of them, maybe. This is where the script always led you, not to certainty, but to closeness, to presence, to memory lived and shared. You look back. Can you see it now? The ancient cities, with their drains and bricks, all cut to ratio. The baths clean and ceremonial. The seals stamped with careful hands. The dockyards where boats came and went without ever writing down their stories. And beyond that, the people, not kings and generals, but traders, bead makers, children, priestesses, shepherds, potters. They left no monuments to themselves, no names carved into mountains, only symbols, only script. And yet they built cities that lasted longer than empires. They engineered systems that still baffle modern minds. They lived in harmony with rivers, and when the rivers left, so did they quietly. Maybe that's the message, not in the script, but in what the script represents. A life of balance, of listening, of gentle permanence. Lonnie settles beside you, her eyes following the same horizon. She holds her necklace twisted, cord tiny shells, a single carved bead. Do you think they knew we'd be here, she asks. You don't answer right away. You watch the light spill slowly across the sky, turning stars into fading brushstrokes. I think you say they hoped someone would care. She nods. Tua walks up last, leaning heavily on his staff. He looks down at the print you left in the dirt. It's not a translation, he murmurs, but it's a return. You stay like that for a while. 3 silhouettes beside a fading symbol, not trying to solve anything, just being part of it. Because the Indus script isn't just an ancient mystery, it's a reminder that not all communication is about clarity, that not all memory needs decoding, that some languages are meant to endure in other ways, in brick, in pattern, in silence. And so, as the sky shifts from charcoal to pearl, and a breeze brushes past like a hand through hair, you feel it gently, but unmistakably. The language lives, not in sound, not in structure, but in every question you now carry, in every quiet moment you've given it. You sit one final time on the edge of a river that doesn't run anymore. Behind you are the bones of cities. Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro, Lothal, names you now carry like old songs whispered rather than sung. Ahead, only the endless stretch of morning mist blurring the line between what has passed and what remains. You take out the seal again for the last time. It's worn now. The edges are duller, the lines less defined than when you first held it, but in a way that makes it more real. More like everything else you've learned on this journey. Clarity fades, but meaning deepens. Let's walk back for a moment slowly. You began in the still silence of ancient riverbanks, tracing marks left in clay by hands long vanished. Marks we still don't understand. Marks we may never understand, but that didn't stop you. You wandered through cities with no kings, no temples shouting power, just careful streets, wells, drains, and bricks that fit together as though planned by quiet minds. A civilization that didn't raise monuments to itself, but still built to last. You stood by the great bath, feeling the hush of sacred water and steam. You watched beads carved smaller than grains of rice, drilled by tools that knew patience better than modern machines. You learned to read patterns, not in letters, but in ritual. Seals passed from hand to hand, not to declare conquest, but to affirm trust. A signature made of fish and tridents and crescents, given with open palms. You followed the script across oceans to Mesopotamia, where no one could read it, but they recognized it anyway. As a presence, a promise, You saw how even in its final days, when rivers changed course and fields turned to dust, the Indus script didn't rage or resist. It simply drifted away, leaving not shouts, but echoes. And through it all, you traveled with others, Lonnie, who saw symbols like waves and braided the world into her necklace. Tua, who spoke in circles and silence and always knew when to say less. You watched them press seals into dirt, not to leave instructions, but to say we were here, because that's what this was about all along. Not decoding, not discovery, but witnessing. So what did you learn? You learned that resilience doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's in the way a city turns its drains just so. In how a seal fits your palm. In how a fish symbol appears again and again. Not because it's flashy, but because it matters. You learn that not all stories are told with grammar. Some are told in patterns, in shared memory, in repetition, in the silent understanding that meaning isn't always meant to be solved, it's meant to be kept. You learn that writing can be an offering, that a language, even when lost, can continue to shape the world through the way it shaped its people. That silence can speak just as loudly as sound. And so, as you close your eyes now, resting at the very end of this long, soft journey, you carry it with you. Not the translation, but the presence, the quiet confidence that someone lived well, thought carefully, believed deeply, and tried with fish and horns and graceful curls to leave behind a small, perfect boat of memory. You were never meant to steer it, only to notice it drifting still, and maybe that's all they asked. So before sleep takes you fully one last time, look at the seal, trace it gently with your thumb. Now close your eyes. Say nothing, just remember, thank you truly for joining me through every emotion, every turn, every moment of this journey. It's been an adventure, and I'm grateful to share it with you. As we close this tale, I wish you a peaceful evening. May you have a restful night, deep sleep, and dreams filled with wonder and light. Rest well, you've earned it, and when you're ready for the next story, I'll be here waiting to journey with you again. Before you go, if you loved this tale, please leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what moved you, surprised you, or lingers with you long after the story ends. Until we meet again, good night, and see you in the next adventure.